Hello everyone and welcome along to your Sunday night edition of the TII podcast. My name is Craig Dennett and I'm your host this evening as we look back on what has been quite a quiet week on the football front for Rangers, but it's definitely not been quiet off the park when it comes to transfer rumours, so there's plenty for us to talk about. Joining me to talk about all of that, we've got Tommy McIntyre. How are we doing, Tommy?
I'm good, thank you very much. Yeah, good to be here. Looking forward to getting into it.
Absolutely. And we're also joined by Reiss as well, who's just watched a couple of videos of some of the rumoured targets and he's very excited about them.
Yeah, it's bringing a bit of excitement into the winter break finally, but I think I'm losing my mind at the lack of football at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll delve into bits about Rangers being in Manga. We'll delve into bits about the Hertha Berlin game yesterday. I think it can be called a football game. I'm not sure if it can be, to be honest. I was quite sad to have spent 2 hours of my life watching that game yesterday afternoon. But also the main focus of this podcast tonight will be on transfer rumours, where we need the squad to come, and then we'll just pick up on some of the comments from Philippe Clement in his Rangers TV interview that was just published about an hour and a half or so ago on Rangers social media channels, and we'll delve into what that means for us going forward. So I think that's probably where we'll start. But Reiss, as you said, we'll start with yourself. The winter break is in full swing, thankfully close to coming to an end. I am not a fan of the winter break. I say that as snow was falling outside my window earlier on today, but I am not a fan of the winter break. How do you feel about it as a concept?
I think it's obviously well backed in terms of research and injury prevention and stuff, and I suppose it is only fair that we remember these guys are employees who deserve time away from their work, but they're also very well paid, and as a fan it's boring for me. I don't enjoy it. I get a weekend off in January and it turns out it's during the winter break and you're looking about going, who's put that? Nobody? Okay, never mind. But the lack of transfer activity is probably what's made it even worse, to be honest.
Yeah, Tommy, we were enjoying all the transfer rumours last week. We had so much talk about. We struggled to fit it into the normal hour, and yet this week everything seems to have gone quiet pretty much. But we've still not signed a player as yet. It can drag a bit when it's the winter break. There's not much football to go on, and there's no transfer activity either.
For everybody listening and watching, that's Craig's subtle warning to me to give shorter answers to make sure that we hit the timeline, by the way. I'm not walking past that. No, you're right. Listen, it's hyperbole season. You come out the back of Christmas and stuff like that, and then it's, right, who's getting signed? There's rumours every minute. Some of that's driven by people just bored, as Reiss quite rightly says. Some of it's driven by the fact that there's a lot of agents trying to get their players in and out of clubs, and there's a lot of outlets that need clicks. And so, they have to justify their existence sometimes. But I think what we could probably agree is, and there is some legitimacy to some of the ones that are out there and some of the ones that we'll talk about, it is night and day in terms of what leaks and doesn't leak these days about Rangers. And actually, for one, I'm quite a fan of that. I don't like everything to be done in public. I like the club to do their business. So, at least there's some positive there. But, it's the season for everybody being a rumour. There you go.
It is, and we're about to spend a long time talking about those transfer rumours. So there we go.
Stay tuned.
So the transfer rumours also continued at pace. Perhaps surprisingly, Reiss left back seems to be a focus over striker. That's kind of switched from last week. I think we all know, and everyone that watched that game yesterday definitely knows that a striker and a striker that can find the back of the net is of utmost priority. But the main one, I guess, we'll start with the latest news that we've heard. Ridvan Yilmaz was obviously expected to go on a 6-month loan to Verona, with Verona effectively obligated to buy Ridvan Yilmaz for a set fee should they stay in Serie A. Interesting news today, Reiss, though, that Galatasaray, I think we expected Galatasaray or a Turkish team to try and come in and take Ridvan Yilmaz. They've been long-time admirers, but Galatasaray came in today, offered a 6-month loan with an option to buy of €4 million. I think that works out about £3.4 million. That was rejected by Rangers, which came as a bit of a surprise to me, but interesting that we did reject it. what was your take on that news?
I think it's interesting because you begin to see where the club's valuation of Ridvan is at that point, if they're deeming that not good enough. Find it interesting though, because am I right in saying that he came from Besiktas?
He did, yeah.
It would be interesting to see if he would cross the Istanbul divide. I know there's
I think quite a lot of players cross that divide quite regularly. I think they are wherever's paying the money, they're quite happy to go when it comes to Turkish football. So I think it's quite regular that between Fenerbahce, Galatasaray, they just all circle around.
Is that the same with? Cause I was at the same as Reiss. Reiss, I don't want to jump over your point here, but I was thinking the exact same.
Right.
Is it the player that's maybe pushed that? Is that the same, Craig, for players who are Turkish, or is that foreign players who's crossed the divide? Because I would think it would be slightly different. I mean, the Turkish people are not known for taking things easy when it comes to our football. So I'd be interested. Maybe somebody in the comments could give us a weather vane on that. I'd be interested if a Turkish person would be easy to jump from one side to the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Rangers on Tour says if Yilmaz is a Besiktas lad, then he won't want to play for another side. I hadn't really taken into the fact that he is Turkish, as obvious as that sounds. I'm just so used to seeing so many foreign players, as you say, Tommy, just doing the rounds as such. But it might be different. I mean,
to be fair, I've swooped in there and stolen all Reiss's credit for his point. To be honest with you, so I'll pass back to you, Reiss. There you go.
On you go, Reiss.
No, it's fine. I think it's interesting to know that we definitely think that he's worth more than the 3.4 they offered, which is probably a good sign considering the outlay we spent on him and the hope of turning that into a profit if he has a good spell elsewhere. But for me, I find it baffling why we are focusing so much on a left back at the moment when it's an attacking threat we need, whether it be a striker, a winger who can score goals, or personally, and I know this is a secondary issue at the minute, I don't think we've replaced that third man running that Arfield gave us either, but I know why we're more focused on strikers because of the failings we've had this season. But to then be spending all your time chasing a left back, being caught in like ripple effect sagas with transfers and stuff, I'm sure we'll come on to, I just don't get it. It bemuses me, but yeah, the target we're looking at seems pretty promising.
Yeah, Tommy, not to undercut Reiss there, but I assume that they don't just focus on one player, sign him, and then go to the next player, and then sign him, and then go to the next position and sign that player. I assume they've got many irons in the fire at one time, and in each position, I'd imagine, as well. But it's the focus this week does seem to have been on the left back, and that Galatasaray news is a bit of could be an interesting twist in that tale.
It could be, and you're absolutely right in terms of the analytics and scouting department. There's several players in each category list drawn up, first option, second option, and then you've got notes of interest. It's a bit like buying a house, right? Sometimes you just fire out a note of interest. By the way, if somebody comes in with an offer or something moves at the club, then let us know and we might want to come back to you. So we've got quite a lot of that in the market as well, whether it's with the clubs directly or the players' agents. A lot of that happens behind the scenes. Just keep us aware of what's going on. To your point, Reiss, and listen, you're absolutely right. We all know that forward line is the problems, but I think the reason that left backs been the focus is that quite clearly Philippe Clement thinks we're unbalanced in terms of he's got a James Tavernier who fires right up high and he wants to be very, very forward pressing. 95% of the games, I think he's on record saying that. He doesn't naturally get that with Barisic or Yilmaz. Right, Yilmaz is a great ball carrier, not great there. Barisic, we know his flaws, we know his positives as well. So he's looking to balance that back line, which allows him to balance the midfield, which in essence allows him to balance the forward line in the team because he wants to move you 15, 20 yards up the pitch. So if you don't have that on the left-hand side, what you're having to get is every time somebody moves out, somebody has to fill in, or you just are slightly weaker team, notwithstanding the fact that Yilmaz is obviously somebody who's been targeted, particularly in Scotland, for the high ball physicality to the back post or diagonally over the top. So I think that's why the focus has been there, because right now it's a complete imbalance in the side, and he needs to address that if he wants to move the team further forward and deliver on the rest of the kind of shape that he's trying to deliver. Yeah,
let's delve into, I guess, the latest transfer rumour to replace Ridvan Yilmaz. And it is Benfica's David Jurasek. I've said his name wrong all day, so I had to read that one just to make sure I got that right. So we obviously spoke last week on the podcast, Tommy, and various other platforms as well, about Josh Doig and the pros and cons, I guess, of going for Josh Doig and the fee that he was potentially going for. It appears he's pretty much on his way to Marseille, although I think Sassuolo are trying to hijack that at the last minute, and Verona are kind of messing everyone about, which I don't think is making anyone happy. So it seems he's out of reach for us, and I think the fee's roughly around £4.5 million. It's questionable whether that would be the amount we'd spend on a left back at this stage, especially when we need to fill in the forward line with a high quality striker. We're also linked with Owen Beck, who was at Dundee first half of the season, called back by Liverpool. Doesn't look like he's going to get the game time they thought he would. Andy Robertson's coming back, but there's not been really any more said about that since. And then this link with David Jurasek came out a couple of days ago now, that he's a top target, would be only a 6-month loan. He's a Czech player. He signed for Benfica in summer from Slavia Prague. He's got a market value of £8 million, so I don't imagine there's going to be an option to buy in there for us at any fee that seems vaguely reasonable. He's contracted until 2028. Is it one that interests you, Reiss? I know you were waxing lyrical about his Slavia Prague performances before you came on here.
Yeah, definitely. It's easy to say with highlights, but he looks to me like a failed winger who's ended up at left back. And that in this highlights reel, he is literally just ripping people to shreds. Like he's quite good at being physical, and he'll take the ball off you, but then he rolls the ball through your legs, he'll flick it over your head, he'll just knock it by you and run by you. He's very, very good at progressing the ball, and I think that could be key in terms of, say you're sitting at Ibrox and you're at the halfway line looking to break lines against a back 10, then he can play a quick 1-2, or he can do it himself if there's no space, if somebody's went man for man. So he's very, very good for what I've seen. He's not really kicked a ball at Benfica, but for someone who was bought for €14 million, there's obviously a player in there that someone's seen and thought he's worth investing in. And from what I've seen of him and data-wise from his Slavia time, he looks to be the real deal.
Yeah, I think he does. Going by our very own John Walker's analysis on Twitter, and I'd very much recommend you check out John's, I'll call it an X account just to be accurate, but I'm not getting away from the fact that I just call it Twitter anyway. Make sure you check out John Walker's account, because some great analysis of some of the rumoured players in there, but apparently he's got very similar stats to Borna Barisic in many areas, which I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. He's got similar stats per 90 for interceptions, tackles and duels, but thankfully he's better aerially. He won't have that wee shoulder on the back to try and just see the ball out for a throw-in. But Tommy, is that a profile of player, I guess, that interests you? A lot of people say, actually, we need a left back that and a right back, I guess, that defends better than the two that we have, but also we still need them to produce going forward, because they are so crucial to how we play. Is it? What do you make of that profile of player?
I'm a fan. I think 80 to 90% of teams have to accept that they're either going to get a defender who has some flaws at the back, fine, but they're great going forward, or vice versa. There's only a really kind of top level of teams who can really afford players who can absolutely do both to a huge degree. He's definitely got the profile. He's definitely a really good player. It just hasn't quite naturally worked at Benfica, but he's contracted for another 4 years. They won't be any kind of rush or anything like that. I think it was reported at the time that the release clause that was put in his contract was like €80 million or something like that. So they do have although a lot of these European clubs do that, they just fire in huge numbers. But 6 footer as well, so there's a bit of addressing of the problem of the diminutive Ridvan Yilmaz.
I think, Tommy, that seems to be a trend of the players we're linked with. It seems to be the taller player. It seems to be 6 foot plus. And I think that might be why Ridvan Yilmaz is actually on his way out the door, because I don't think, from what Ridvan Yilmaz has shown, actually, when he's on the ball and when he's defending, I think he's actually pretty decent. I don't think there's anything wrong with what he's doing, but teams do target him from a height perspective, and the Scottish League is physical, and I wonder if that's just Philippe Clement would rather have a more physical team to help combat those threats.
I think you're right to a degree. It's definitely been something that's been part of the analysis. I'm with you. I don't think Ridvan Yilmaz is a bad player. I think we're slowly starting to see the best of him. I like his ability to carry the ball. He's actually not somebody who hides for the physical battle either. But yeah, he's definitely a target. And as you get higher quality opposition, that's going to start to tell. So yeah, we are looking to kind of replace that with more physicality, and he fits the profile in terms of being a 6 footer, being a really good player. He's got tons of time to develop. If we can get him in for 6 months, Yilmaz going the other way to Verona or anything like that. Although you're right, Verona seem to be absolutely giving everybody a hard time. They're very much that, Reiss, you'll keep me right, you're younger than me, but that they're that version of that girl or boy who says, I'm only talking to you. Right, they seem to have everybody in the phone book, and they are messaging them saying, right, you fancy this toy guy? So yeah, listen, if we're getting players of that quality coming in, that can only stand us in good stead. The only problem you always face into at this time of year, particularly with loans, is how quickly do you embed them? How quickly can they get up to speed? How quickly can they get part of the team? Because it is sometimes a difficult league to drop into. I should say just before that, I don't want to walk past this because I know Sharpie and Stubborn were giving me a bit of a hard time here. It's an air conditioner and it's a heater, right? And the wardens let me out every Sunday to do the podcast, so that's exactly what's happening here. But it's definitely not a letterbox. But if you hear the pips, that's me having to put my phone card or my 10 pences back in so they can let me have my one phone call.
Yeah, it's the smallest air conditioning unit I think I've ever seen. So
it's far away. It's far away. This is quite a big space. Right? This is my office, my garden office. So it's a big space, right? And then there's another one through there in the gym as well. But
there you go. Showing off, absolutely showing off. Anyway, let's get back to
the football. I don't use the gym, evidently. Right, that's the problem.
Let's get back to the football. Reiss Scott 05 says, why not wait until the summer for a left back? Use the wage for other areas. I think if Ridvan Yilmaz does leave, we do need a second left back. At least if not one that's going to start straight away. I'm not Borna Barisic's biggest fan. I won't go back over the reasons for that. I think I've said it every week pretty much these days. But what do you make of that opinion from Scott 05?
I don't think it's so much the wages. I think if you get rid of Ridvan as we're planning to, then you definitely need to replace him because we've got Barisic left. But attack is probably where I would prioritise. But I think if you lose Ridvan, then left back does need done. And just on the back of a comment there, another thing that said with me on Jurasek is he's actually played with Sima before. He played with Sima for a season at Slavia, so they'll have that understanding on the left-hand side that could be pivotal. They've worked together before. They know how each other work. They've played on the same flank, so they have that direct experience. And I think Jurasek, especially if we get rid of Ridvan, will be a quality addition. Ridvan, really mixed that up there. He would have been Ridvan Yilmaz, but no, I think Jurasek will be a great addition if we can bring him in, and he's undoubtedly, if we could make it permanent, I would do it. I think if you can do it regardless of any other issues going on in the team, if you can make that swap, you do it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting seeing the comments come in about Ridvan and his performance. Obviously, Tommy and I think he's doing okay in a large part. Stubborn here, we've got Ridvan's passing is crap. They've been caught out a few times every game he's played in. I think that's probably partly due to his starting position as well, to be fair, because he is much higher up than Borna Barisic is. But he also has more pace to try and get back to it as well. Buenos John says they need to hold on to Ridvan. You can see his quality. It's interesting the mix of views there are about Ridvan. No one seems to be, there isn't a consensus, if there ever is a consensus amongst Rangers fans, that there's not a consensus on whether he should stay or whether he should go. I think part of that's probably down to the transfer fee that we've paid for him as well, and working out if we ever really will get true value for Ridvan, or we're better cutting our losses on that.
So just on that, Craig, and it's maybe a point that we're all aware of, but we're walking past, right, which is Philippe Clement's looked at that team and he goes, one of the key areas I need to replace is left back. So he's seeing something that is going to impact, much like I was saying earlier, the rest of the team. That's why he needs a change in there. So evidently, of all the pressing areas, and we know that the forward line is there, and we've already done something in moving out Sam Lammers, and we'll do more in there. But Philippe Clement sees it as a key area for the next 6 months as we push for the title and Scottish Cup and furthering in Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. Plenty of comments coming in on Yilmaz as well. Just want to bring up this comment from Scott Hammond, actually. Ridvan Yilmaz was bought, we were told it was a fee of £5.5 or £6 million, I think, overall, but there were plenty of stages in that. It was a sort of phased fee. If Ridvan was bought for £3 or £4 million, rising to £5 million, do we know the criteria for the rise? No, we don't know the criteria for the rise. I assume it's based on appearances, sort of winning trophies, qualifying for Champions League, that sort of thing. Yeah. So I'd imagine it's along that sense. So perhaps we haven't fulfilled that whole, and we won't have to fulfill that whole amount should we sell Ridvan at this moment in time, and perhaps the initial public figure that we saw isn't quite as high as what we'll need to cover, I guess, by when we sell him. So it's always difficult to know with transfer fees and wages, because they could be so wildly different. Not to quote Michael Beale, who came out and was it earlier this season, he came out and says we paid nowhere near the amount that they said we did, when actually we probably did pay near the amount we said we did. So, but yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, I think I was in that press conference that day where he said that, and then I think it wasn't too long later on that the accounts came out, and you're like, no, it's pretty much what we have been saying.
Yeah,
but yeah, there we go.
Yeah, absolutely. But watch this space with Ridvan Yilmaz, and definitely watch this space over the next few days with David Jurasek. From what I believe, from what I've read in various news articles and things like that, it's basically part of a chain that needs to happen for this transfer to have any chance of going through. The start of that, I guess, is Josh Doig leaving to Verona, Ridvan Yilmaz then going to Verona from Rangers, but Ridvan Yilmaz could go to a Galatasaray, for example, and it still has the same effect for us. Interestingly, Alvaro Fernandez going from Man United to Benfica. I hadn't heard of him before either, to be honest, but Alvaro Fernandez is a left back for Man United's youth team, I think, or he's part of the reserve team at least. And Benfica wanting to buy him. He's getting his medical on Monday, tomorrow as we're recording this, and then that would then allow David Jurasek to be sent out on loan. By all accounts, it's ourselves, Marseille and Lens that are interested in Jurasek. Marseille's first priority is Josh Doig. They seem to be following us around in the left back market, but I don't. It probably gives me a wee bit of confidence. Actually, we're searching in the right areas, because budget wise, actually Marseille aren't too different from us. They can probably pay a little bit higher wages, but in terms of transfer fees, they're not paying much different to what we are. So it tells me we're searching in the right areas, and they're definitely pushing towards the top of the French league as well this season. So that gives me a bit of encouragement, but it'll be a bit of watch this space for this one. Keep your eye on the TII Twitter account, X account, social media accounts. Let's go for, and we'll keep you up to date with the latest news as
I do enjoy watching you continually stumble over this X Twitter thing. By the way, I do enjoy that.
I can't get used to X. I can't. This feels weird. Anyway, on to the next one. Reiss, I'll start with you on this one as well. The other big transfer link this week is with Dinamo Zagreb midfielder Marko Bulat. I'm going to go for Bulat. Rumoured asking price of €5 million. 22-year-old central midfielder that can play in that sort of attacking midfielder role. He's won the title with them the last 2 seasons, made 23 appearances so far this season, 5 goals and 2 assists. He likes a long-range shot, which is something that we don't really have in the locker in the squad at the moment. His passing accuracy and his long passing accuracy are both in around the 85% mark, and he's created sort of 15 chances or so in his 23 games so far. Those stats are from John Walker again, but John's assessment is that he's completely different to what we have in our squad at the moment in terms of midfield, and it has felt during especially the first part of the season, probably last season as well, it felt the same, but it's felt like we are missing that really creative player in the midfield that can just drive us forward. We've hoped that Cantwell would be that at various times. We've hoped that Tom Lawrence would be that at various times, and that's not quite come to pass. And if Marko Bulat is that player or is that type of player, I think it's encouraging that Philippe Clement has identified that as a space in the squad going forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's quite an interesting player because just looking at him data wise, I can't quite make out what role he plays in the midfield. I've not seen videos of him, so that would probably give it the context you need. But he seems to be a bit of a carrier. Seeing the way Wijnaldum at Liverpool was part of a great team and played a great role in it, but didn't really get much of the credit. He seems to be a bit like that. He'll not pop up with hundreds of goals and assists. I think in 21 appearances last season, he got 1 assist. So he seems to be a bit more of a deep lying midfielder, which probably speaks to Jack, Lundstrom, all aging, that area of the squad consistently injured and having to play guys like Dujon Sterling there. I think it's possibly something to do with that, but I may be proven wrong on actually seeing the guy. But I find this one a bit hard to believe, Craig, to be honest with you, just because originally I think the source came from a guy on Twitter X that was under 1,000 followers and didn't really seem to be working for any reputable sources or anything. So whether it will happen or not, I'm not sure, but he seems to be a decently established player, decently being a word I've probably invented there, but yeah, he seems good and that he's got good pedigree if he's at Dinamo Zagreb, so he must be a decent player. And from what I've seen of his highlight reel, he looks like he's very good technically more than anything else, and I don't think he'll misplace many passes. He seems quite good in tight spaces, but we'll wait and see whether there's actually fabric to the rumour or whether it is just something that comes and goes.
Yeah, I think by all accounts, going by John's analysis and what I've read, he is more of the in that either in that number 8 role or in that number 10 role in the midfield is kind of where he sits. RFC 72 says we really lack a creative midfielder who gets in the box. Absolutely, we do. We've missed that for God knows how long. Tommy, you maybe will be able to remember the last sort of midfielder of that kind.
Thanks for that, mate. Yeah. Okay.
But Tommy, is it one that interests you? Is it one that really a €5 million fee at this in this transfer window when we know it's difficult? Actually, we're probably looking more at probably short-term fixes to get us through to the end of the season to then reset again, just like we did. We had to reset last summer, and it looks like we're going to have to reset a bit again this coming summer. But get us through to the end of the season with some added quality in there that can see us compete on at least on the league front and the Scottish Cup front, if not the European front as well.
Yeah, I think it is a big fee, and spending that in January is always interesting as well. But I think people need to not make their minds up, but there's a lot that we tend to throw into the midfield conversation, which is people saying, quite rightly, by the way, I'm not going to go at anybody, but people saying we need a creative midfielder, right? What does that mean? Do you want somebody like a Stephen Davis who can take a hold of a game, can direct the flow of traffic, can play passes, can ping them outside, left, right, and all that type of stuff? Do you want a midfielder who's going to break beyond and get goals? Do you want a midfielder who's going to sit nice and tidy and clean up and protect the back? What would be the back two if you're pushing your full back so far forward so it kind of drops into a 3, whatever that looks like? Yes, you've got Jack, question mark on how long he's at the club, Lundstrom, etc. Raskin can play in that deeper role as well and does it pretty effectively. So, and then what happens to a Tom Lawrence and stuff like that if you're looking to buy another player who sits further forward? And with Reiss, it may be that he usually plays further forward, but he's played a hell of a lot of games sitting quite far back in that midfield, you know, if you like the terminology, the bottom of the diamond and all that type of good stuff, right? But so it's for people to just be really clear about what they think that midfield needs, and is then one of those questions being answered by a Marko Bulat, so to speak. I'm not entirely convinced, but again, I say that from a position of stats only and some clips, and you don't really get a feel for people until you really see them. I think if it was a loan with that being the option, price and us having first option, that would feel more comfortable to me. I always get slightly wary of big purchases in January because you don't get as long to it as you'd like to. So, we definitely need things in the midfield, and we know we need things further forward as well. It raises a further question about what the club feel Tom Lawrence is going to be able to do long term, or if that's going to be a wider problem. But if we're looking at midfielders and we're looking at that kind of calibre and we're looking to spend a bit of money, that bodes particularly well. Not entirely too sure about spending that on Marko Bulat at this point in time.
Yeah, Reiss, we've spoken a bit about a few sort of players in there. Tommy's mentioned Tom Lawrence. I mentioned Todd Cantwell earlier on. One player that I guess we've kind of ignored a little bit is Jose Cifuentes. We all thought he would be that player that was coming in and charging from midfield into the box. Sid says, I think we can turn Sifu into a player. Last game at Tynecastle, he played well. For me, he's not up to speed as yet. And the question around it is, can he get up to speed? Is he the type of player that's going to get up to speed at some point? He obviously had his injury after his... I'm just going to call it what it is, a bit of a stupid suspension that he had at that point. But where do you stand on Cifuentes, and if he has a longer term future at Rangers? He's been here for 6 months or so now. It can take much longer than that for a player to settle into Scotland, especially if they're coming from LA or South America.
So I have been probably one of the most openly critical fans about Cifuentes since he arrived. I think too many games he's been totally passive, and the game's just passing by. He just kind of jogs about, happy to be there, doesn't contribute much going forward, doesn't bust a gut to get back and cover, make tackles and interceptions. But in a game that I didn't actually see was the one at Tynecastle, where supposedly he played very well. So I'm happy to bow to other people's knowledge in that match. But from what I've seen of him, it's not so much is he up to speed, it's is he up to scratch. That I think he's just very apathetic almost when he plays, that he just seems happy to jog about, not too fussed. He plays like his team are 3-0 up. But that being said, he is an Ecuadorian who's moved to the States and then moved to Scotland. So he sort of gradually came from a really hot climate to a somewhat hot to a freezing cold climate. And I think he's spoken to Rangers TV and other outlets about his struggle to settle in and how it's been really, really cold. That you do need to, I suppose, take the personal aspect into it as well. And I thought it was quite funny that we were linked with an Ecuadorian left back during the week as well. I thought, is that just a wee settling in pal for Cifuentes? But to be honest with you, I think within the next year to 18 months, I don't think Cifuentes will last as a Rangers player.
Yeah, I like Reiss that you call LA a somewhat hot climate. I think if you go to LA in the summer, you will not be calling it a summer.
Pavements are melting, you know what I mean? Sidewalks are melting. There we go. I speak the lingo, obviously.
So yeah, that was an interesting one. RFC 72 Tommy comes in and says, Sifu, we won't get the best until next year. He's played a full season already, near enough. First time away from home and a whole new style of football physicality to get used to. Do you still have hope that Cifuentes can make an impact at Rangers?
I do actually. I mean, I get Reese's points, and they're very valid and logical. I think there is a player inside Cifuentes, and he just needs time. And I think RFC 72 lays that out pretty clearly there. Actually, it's all pretty spot on in terms of he needs to just get. I don't think it's so much a technical thing as the speed of the game. That there isn't a lot of time to just look about. Space is quite tight. You have to work pretty hard. Things that I'm certain he's got in his locker. He just needs to get up to speed with it, and he's probably working with the right manager at the right moment to be able to do that. So I would reckon, unless a really, really interesting offer came in for him in the pre-season, in the close season, that would keep a hold of him. I think he's got something to offer, actually.
Yes, I agree with that.
Add to that as well, I watched an interview with Jesse Marsh recently, who it was after he spell at Leeds, so it must be fairly recently, who compared the MLS teams, the best sides in MLS, to top-end championship, which for me signals whereabouts Cifuentes probably would be. And is that the sort of calibre player we should be getting into compete in Europe, compete in Old Firm games and stuff? It might be okay as a squad player, because with MLS now, and I think it's probably a growing body of evidence, but I'd like to be disproven on it. That you look at the guys for Scotland who have played out there and played here, just as a comparison. Lewis Morgan, James Sands, both standout players for New York sides in MLS, both regular starters hyped up out there. Decent-ish squad players at Old Firm teams. So for Cifuentes, that probably biases my mind a bit as well with the comparison for Marsh and previous experience of players from MLS, but I'd love to be proven wrong and I hope he does cut it.
It is fair that, right? I think with those examples, you're right, but some of those examples are from a point in time as well. The MLS is getting slightly stronger, and Cifuentes wasn't there that long, and actually, he's played particularly well before he's went to America, and he's been a kind of up and coming kind of prospect. I think we've got him at a really good time actually that we can get our hooks into him and develop that player. So whilst I get your point, I think it doesn't naturally translate to Cifuentes. I think Cifuentes could be, hopefully, the aberration, the exception to the rule, because, yeah, I think you're right about the James Sands stuff and all that, but I still think there's something to come from Cifuentes. I do.
Yeah, I think we've seen Reiss just add a few more examples into that. Ryan Gould's obviously tearing it up over for Vancouver. Johnny Russell as well for Kansas City was doing really well for a period of time. So I guess that kind of gives a wee bit of a signal as to the level of the teams and the quality and the players that we're seeing out in the MLS. Obviously, Lionel Messi's out there at the same time, so some of the players are better than others. I think it's fair. To say, Reiss, before
he's too small to make it in Scotland. If we played him at left back or we played him in the middle of the park or anything like that, he would never make it.
Yes, I think Lionel Messi coming through in Scotland in the 90s would have been interesting. I think Reiss, interestingly, and I guess perhaps worryingly, we spoke a wee bit about the start, the fact that the focus on a striker seems to have dissipated a little bit in the media. There doesn't seem to be as many people talking about it. There doesn't need to be as many people. It doesn't need to be as names coming forward. We'd seen Lawrence Shankland. We'd seen Emmanuel Dennis. We'd seen a few others touted about. Has it surprised you that's gone quiet?
Yeah, it has, to be honest with you, because I think it's the most pressingly obvious need for the squad, that we need attacking reinforcements that are a threat at goal. For me, Dessers isn't great in the sense that he's not had a great start to the season. He came on to a bit of form, and I think the Old Firm game was probably a big knock for him. You just hope it doesn't impact his confidence too much, because I think he was beginning to build up quite a bit of speed. But it was actually in a conversation I had with Scott Patterson as well, that one of the reasons I don't see the Shankland deal happening is because, say Shankland was to sign for us just now, come March or April when Danilo's back, you've got 4 starting strikers there, or 4 strikers who could start, if we're counting Silva, Dessers, Danilo if he comes back this season, and anyone we bring in. Not to mention Kemar Roof, who's a bit of an enigma that you don't know if he's going to be back this year or when he's going to be back. So I think it's pretty hard to sell that to anyone coming in, that, listen, you can be one of 5 here if everyone comes back at some point this season. To begin with, you might be one of 3, and if you're bringing in a forward like Fabio Silva and have just paid the money we paid for Dessers, I think it's quite a hard gig to sell that come on in and challenge with these two.
Tommy, I think Reiss probably makes a fair point in terms of once all these players are back, but we can't just sit about and wait until these players are back to then have a striker. But Fabio Silva, interestingly, did a bit of an interview when he was over in Spain with the team, and he spoke about his preferred role in the team, and he said he much prefers to play either out wide coming into the attacking areas or in that number 10 role and pushing forward into that box. So he says he's not a number 9, and then we immediately saw Philippe Clement play him as a number 9 in the first half of the friendly against Hertha Berlin. But it's interesting that actually Fabio Silva is maybe someone that might, for example, when Sima's at AFCON just now, he might replace Sima in that role to start with, and then we might see the two of them sort of swapping left and right out wide. But it does seem that Fabio Silva will take on more of that role than the central striker role. Hugo Bear says we desperately need a centre forward. I think every Rangers fan thinks we need a centre forward, so I don't think it's any doubt that we should sign one. this January, the Warren Shankland links don't go away, I guess. I think it'll be one that if it's going to happen, it'll be towards the end of the window. But how long can we really wait? We're about to go into, fair enough, we've got Copenhagen on Tuesday. We've then got Dumbarton away on Saturday night. After that, we're going into a massive run of fixtures again, that just almost relentless run of fixtures, Saturday, Wednesday style. It doesn't give me the thought that we can wait till the last day in January to get a striker in the door.
Yeah, I mean, you want to get the business done as soon as possible, but there's a lot of different facets to that. So just going back for a second, yeah, Silver's not an out-and-out striker. I think we all know that. He likes, as he's referenced himself, he likes to play off the side. Sima away to AFCON for question mark amount of time, depending on how that goes. I get the point about who's there. The only fit striker on the books is Cifuentes. Right, we've moved Lammers out. Danilo, I doubt you're really going to see anything from him this season. Really just think about Danilo in a Rangers jersey next season. Kemar Roof could pop up and do a run of 3 games and score goals and then disappear, and you see him, turn the millennium or something like that. There's nobody really else that's there. So we do need to get somebody who is as guaranteed of goals, certainly domestically, because we're in a title fight, and we are right in a title fight, to get us over the line. The Shankland one makes as much sense and is clearly as much sense as like the Boyd, transfer did, in that you are getting somebody who wants to be at the club, you're getting somebody who supports the club, and you're getting somebody who's going to bang in goals domestically. And it's probably a peak, right? Shankland's obviously, Boyd had a little bit more in him to go. Shankland's probably at his peak right now as well. Again, it comes back to the window. So that one probably is the hardest one of them all, because you're looking at a domestic rival who feels that they've got you over a barrel. It's January. You're desperate for goals. That's always an inflated price anyway. Hearts won't want to sell, right? Or they want to get blood out of the stone. And so they're in no rush, so they can bide their time. We're looking at other options. We're having conversations, but we know that one makes sense. I think it might be a late one, and that it might not happen either, because there is always going to be a number that's just not palatable, and Hearts will have a really inflated sense of what they think they can get out of Rangers for Lauren Shankland. That's when it comes down to, right, who's next on the list in terms of who we've scouted, and then what can be done there. I don't think we're finished in terms of bringing in forward line reinforcements, but it might be another loan. It might not be Lauren Shankland, although I think we can all agree that if he was to rock up in the Rangers jersey, he would get goals. The question maybe for the club and for everybody else is he, for the amount of money you're about to spend, is he the long-term solution? Are you going to get Lauren Shankland in a jersey for 3 years? Is he going to do well in Europe? I think he would actually do a decent job right across the piece. But those are all the factors that go in as you get pressurised towards the end of the window and you need to get somebody in and you want to bolster the squad. We just referenced it a minute ago as well. There's lots of chains behind these things in terms of other players moving in and out as well. So that's a TBC one everybody's just keeping their eyes on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was immediately obvious again in that Hertha Berlin friendly yesterday how much we need a striker, and a striker who has the confidence and the willingness to hit a shot first time. So many times in that game alone, never mind all the previous games we've watched so far this season, have we seen strikers get in a good position, have the chance to take a shot, and then they take a touch, they take another touch, they run into a defender, they lose the ball, the chance is gone. Whereas if they just hit it first time, it's not sitting perfectly for them, but hit it first time and you take your chance, you might catch keeper by surprise. We don't do enough of that. And I think that's where a player like Lauren Shankland is appealing to people. I think that's why so many people are behind that, because they've seen what kind of goals he scores, they've seen what kind of positions he takes up. He's done well against us many times in the last sort of season and a half or so. But I think it's the frustration that we see at how many chances we create versus how many goals we actually score. And I think that's where the real frustration comes. But like you say, Tommy, a lot of this relies on chains. Hearts will, like you say as well, be trying to get as much as possible out of us. If Lauren Shankland isn't an option just now, but it's a potential option in summer, then the club kind of need to know. And then if they don't know already, need to know in the next week or so, because we can't sit around waiting to the last minute about maybe you get him, maybe you don't. It's not an area we can play about with, because I think it's genuinely the difference between winning the title and not winning the title.
I think you're right, and not to kind of labour on it as well, but there's different factors to that too. You've got the Lowry dynamic, and maybe Hearts are looking for a player. Do they get other loans from us as well? There's so much in that particular one, but Hearts hold the cards, right? Because they've got a scorer. He's also their captain, right? So their boardroom, their manager, etc. Unless they get a really big number that they can turn to the Hearts fans and say, look, big fat check, manager's getting that, refresh the squad, then they're having to turn around their boardroom, their manager, all that kind of stuff, and say, we've just punted our top scorer and our captain to Rangers mid-season as we fight to get as high up the league as we possibly can, in terms of Hearts, that is. So, yeah, it's a difficult sell for them as well. That's why I come back to January is just completely fraught with danger when you're trying to bring anybody in, particularly on the permanent basis. And that's why there's a host of other names on the lists when it comes to potential forwards.
Yeah,
See,
GS.
just to add to, Craig, just to add to what Tommy was saying, taking it from a Hearts perspective as well, I think it's quite important to remember that last season Hearts sacked Robbie Neilson in favour of Stephen Naismith because they viewed getting third rather than fourth as value are worth £6 million to them. So I think that's quite important to bring up as well and remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And GS comes in, we'll just round off the sort of transfer discussion here. GS comes in and says, what if Clement doesn't want Shankland? Clement doesn't want Shankland and we don't get Shankland. I think it's easy, it's fair enough to that. I think what I would say to that, though, is that Clement has, on various occasions, I think, spoken about Lawrence Shankland and the quality of player that he thinks he's seen in him since he's been here. I think there was 2 or 3 occasions when around games we've played Hearts where he's spoken about Lawrence Shankland and the qualities that he has, which makes me think, and I might be putting 2 and 2 together and getting 400, but it makes me think that there's at least a wee bit of admiration in there for Lawrence Shankland as a player and his qualities. It may not be enough for Philippe Clement to want to bring him into Rangers, but I think there's at least a bit of admiration for the qualities that Lawrence Shankland could bring. Right, let's get on to the winter break then, and Philippe Clement's comments himself. So he gave a bit of insight to Rangers TV. It was broadcast or published around an hour and a half before we came live here, so I'd encourage you all to go and have a watch of that on Rangers TV. But I just wanted to pick out some of the key points from this, and thanks very much to Kyle for doing the hard yards on these notes for me, since I didn't get a chance to see it myself. But Philippe Clement spoke about he wanted the team to train and play against Hertha Berlin with heavy legs to get them in better physical shape for the next few months. It's not the first time we've heard that tactic. I think Gerrard used it a couple of times as well, in friendlies such as this. And it's interesting because obviously Philippe Clement focused on the fitness or lack thereof of the players when he first came in, and is obviously something that is continued. The team have been having individual talks every evening between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m, which is also interesting, kind of feeds into the stories we were hearing about Cyril Dessers sitting 1-to-1 with Philippe Clement for 30 minutes on the plane to Betis, and stories like that. It feeds into that each player is given their own role and responsibility, and they're given their own instructions, and he's been very clear with them as to how he wants them to play. He spoke about one big group together being our strength in difficult circumstances with all the injuries that we've had in the first half of the season. He said that coming to Spain has brought the group closer together. He said there's already a big difference in many different departments from when he came in, which is encouraging to hear. I think we've all seen, especially in the playing department, how much of a difference there has been. He spoke a bit about Alex Rae and his importance. He says he knows what it's like to be a Rangers player. He knows the dressing room. He helps the players a lot with the pressures of being a Rangers player, which I think is really interesting, something that almost all Rangers fans underestimate, because we've not experienced that. We've been on the other side creating the pressure, but we've not been the ones on the receiving end of the pressure, and we probably do underestimate how much of an impact that can have, especially when it's in a negative fashion or negative circumstances. And then the last point on transfers, he said everybody's working day and night. Not the easiest window if you don't have the most money. You need to be creative and fast, but that's the reality of these things. Reiss, interesting comments from Philippe Clement there, was there anything that stood out to you as particularly interesting?
I love the individual talks, to be honest with you, because I think it's one of those things that in training, during matches, at half time, you very rarely ever find the opportunity to do so. Having played and coached, I'd love to be able to sit down one-to-one with every player and say, this wee thing I need you to do more or better, or the next step for you is, and just work on that individually, because I think those begin to add up. And that if we could start improving small things like the angle Borna Barisic receives passes for corner goals and that, you're automatically 5 yards up the park. You're more likely to start attacks through there. Possibly why we're seeing left back being targeted so much for transfer options, but that individual aspect, plus I think it helps as well with the personal development, that you really begin to feel like this guy cares about me, not just about the team, and you don't feel expendable. You feel like you're valued and he wants you to develop as well as part of the team as a whole. And I really like that aspect of it.
Tommy Reiss has picked out the individual talks there, the attention to individual players. Is there anything in particular that stood out to yourself from Clement's sort of narrative of how the week's gone?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same noise that's been behind the scenes at the club since Philippe Clement came in. That attention to detail, that collectivisation. There's no longer the noise that was there previously of players being ostracised, even if they're not in the team, and only certain players being spoken to. It very much is as Reiss is saying, there's a collective feeling and everybody knows what the message is and is part of that group. And then there's that individual part, in terms of, for example, Sam Lammers, listen, stop pressurising yourself, relax, don't try too hard. But ultimately that's not going to work for Sam Lammers, although I think Cyril Dessers has tried to take on some of those messages as well. So yeah, it comes back to what Philippe Clement had said since he came in the door. He pays attention to detail. He's not blinded by data, because he thinks a lot about the mental side of the game, and that's why he's trying to get in the players' heads and say, listen, this is where we are. He's also trying to work with, this is a pressurised club, right? And some players might not have quite got that from previous dealings before they rocked up here, but there is an absolute pressure to coming in and pulling on that Rangers jersey. Doesn't matter where you've come from, it feels slightly different. And some players can handle that. Some players definitely can. Some players can grow into it. And so that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to get the players to then take that message into, right, get round and support your colleagues. Don't ostracise them. Don't leave them out. And as we've said previously, he's focused in on the analytics and the fitness side, because he was definitely unhappy with how the club was doing that type of thing behind the scenes.
Yeah. Final question for you both before we round off the podcast, and it'll be the same question for each of you. Tommy, I'll come to you first. With it, we start competitive action again next Saturday against Dumbarton in the Scottish Cup, quickly followed by, I think it's Hibs midweek. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's Hibs midweek in the arranged game. How are you feeling heading into competitive games again, and what's going to be a huge few months for Rangers where we could really make a mark?
Yeah, it's Hibs then St Mirren, if I remember correctly, both away. I think, and I referenced this in our mid-season review pod, which is on our YouTube channel and downloadable from Spotify and all that type of good stuff, in that we've got ourselves right into a title race. We've won the first trophy of the season. Scottish Cup will look after itself. We're still in Europe. If we can continue on the path that Philippe Clement has set for us, we'll still be in there. I expect Celtic to get better, to be honest with you. They've had a ropey part of the season as well. It definitely comes down to who's going to stick the course and who can bring in the best bodies at this point in time. It is an absolutely seminally important transfer window. We've started early. Let's see if we can get in, because I don't think we are strong enough to guarantee anything where we currently are, particularly up top.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with that one. Reiss, same question to you. How are you feeling heading back into competitive action and the business end of the season?
Cautiously optimistic in that you've seen marked developments, not in just players, but the team as a whole since Clement's come in, and the turnaround's been superb, to be honest with you. I'm running out of superlatives there. nearly used one that was a bit over the top, but I think, as Tommy says, we can't nail anything on just now. I always take the approach of expect everybody else to be doing as much work as they possibly can, and if we expect Celtic are going to get massively better, and we go, right, we need to match that, then it stands us in a good stead no matter what they do. So I think we need to just constantly be thinking that we need to maximise everything, but the one game at a time approach I think is brilliant, and I think it's good to take now to project right to the end of the season, but Philippe Clement will, as of next week, just be straight back to one game at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good way to sum it up. And just so we end on a positive note, because we do like to end on a positive note here at the TII podcast, let's bring in Gavin Quinn's comment that big Philippe Hollander is going to Anderlecht for a reasonable fee. Just our luck, he's playing brilliant. Yes, I think Philippe Hollander has been doing particularly well for Malmo. He's made his way back into the Swedish national team, and now it looks like he's away to Belgium for a good fee. God knows what happened there. It's a shame because he was our best defender by a mile for such a long time, but he just couldn't get on the park, and that was such a shame. So, but yes, Philippe Hollander is indeed being transferred for a reasonable transfer fee. Tommy, I see you looking perplexed.
Well, I was just thinking, is it not Odense? It's not Malmo.
Oh, it might have been. I thought it was Malmo, but it might be.
I think he's at Odense and going to Anderlecht. I was just laughing as well. It's just typical. Just by the way, in the comments, somebody had mentioned Van Veen. We spoke to the club and we put this out on our X a couple of weeks ago. The club aren't interested in Van Veen. Not somebody we're looking at.
There you go. There we go. And on that note, we will round off the podcast there. So thank you very much to Tommy and Reiss for joining us. Thank you very much to you all for listening. Plenty of content coming up across the TII channels, whether it's our YouTube channel, which if you've enjoyed this video, please drop a like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and you'll get all the relevant notifications and various things around uploads. And you'll get as soon as we put new content on the channel. Make sure you like and you follow our Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. Make sure you get stuck into all that as well, and you'll get all the latest discussions on the transfer news as well. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and until next time, goodbye.